All right, thank you guys for being here again. And I'm ready to share with you a presentation I threw together, but this is like 10 years of putting together presentations about the Law of One books, which are so detailed. And I've been hosting monthly online discussions about the Law of One since like 2020. And before that, I was at a library. I was doing monthly discussions with local people in Colorado Springs. Um, so I have a pretty good sense of what's in the material. And what's interesting about the Law of One material is that when it was originally channeled through Carla Ruckert, and they didn't want to give a lecture. So you can't just like get a full teaching from reading it. You have to see whatever Don Elkins, who was asking the questions, whatever his stream of consciousness was, or at points it was prepared, or he had notes ahead of time to say, I'm going to go into this subject and then I'm going to go into this subject. But a lot of times he would get an answer that would just be so baffling to him that he would just say, I'm going to touch on that the next time. And then he'd switch topics. So it's constantly switching topics when you read the books. So that's why having presentations like this can make it easier to put together a clear picture of what certain subjects were actually the total teaching of certain subjects was. You just have to pick from a lot of different sessions from the material. But I highly recommend getting the raw contact books and trying going through the newest editions, which are called the Raw Contact Teaching the Law of One. This is material that David Wilcock made his staple, his foundation, and I'll talk about him more. This is certainly all framing this in with him in mind right now because he had a huge impact on my life, like a lot of you, and it's still challenging to think about that he's passed away. Um, but this weekend is kind of in honor of him, and this presentation, I could say, is kind of in honor of him. I threw some things in here that are what moved me so much from his teaching. So I'm calling this the workers of the Ascension, and they use the metaphor of the harvest as the Bible used. But when I use the word harvest, I'm talking about the ascension or the graduation. Those are all words that the graduation is another word commonly used in Law of One. And the harvest is also referred to as being the transition. We're making a transition into the higher density consciousness, the fourth density consciousness. So in this presentation, I'll talk about the nature of reality as the Law of One describes it, the nature of densities and dimensions. I'll talk about the nature of wanderers, which is also a synonym for star seeds. Most people have heard the word star seeds, but basically when I say the word wanderer, I'm talking about the word star seed. And I'll talk about the nature of ascension, the nature of harvest, and the nature of the harvesters, which kind of refers to angelic beings. There's three different categories of harvesters I'll talk about that they shared about in the material. There are many beings helping us right now with this transition process. I'll talk about healing and balancing and accessing intelligent infinity and miracles, which is what is a natural side effect of coming into full healing and full balance with the creative source of all intelligence. So I could start out sharing. We've had some incredible, significant breakthroughs in the collective consciousness around UFOs, UAPs, and we just saw recently, Trump put out an order saying Pentagon has to release the UFO files now. He's put out a lot of cryptic statements that there's something amazing coming, and we'll see how much he can follow through on that. But we've had also the legislative branch is pushing strongly to get more declassified from the Pentagon, with specific videos being called out that people have not seen yet, but the Congress people have. We've got new legislation underway that should make it easier for whistleblowers to come forward. It's just been such a massive cultural shift, though, that we can actually now talk to our friends and family about this much more easily. This is still an ongoing shift, but it's finally happening. Yeah. And I was very, very pleased to see Anna Polina Luna, the representative, who's heading up one of the most amazing legislative committees we've ever seen, where she's trying to go into the depths of what's been covered up about things like UFOs, JFK assassination, all amazing subjects. But she actually tweeted on, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday about David Wilcock's passing. And I've seen her sharing about the Book of Enoch, and it sounds like she knows what David Wilcock has been sharing. She knows some of those things. Um, so it's very encouraging. Um, but interestingly, I would say, we're in a kind of dichotomy where what is coming out to the public mainstream consciousness through popular figures, through Congress people like Joe Rogan, people like Tim Burchett, the people who are sort of out front are still being very cautious to maintain their reputation and only point to things that they feel like are not going to make them look like they're too far out there. I don't know what everyone actually believes, but people are still probably afraid to talk about things like channeling. Like I don't hear Congress people talking about the legitimacy of channeling, but and there's no you don't gain power or reputation from talking about woo-woo subjects. Um, so, but David Wilcock had no trouble, and it's amazing. Even most ufologists don't seem to want to talk about channeling, but David Wilcock put them on the map, put LL Research, the organization behind the Law of One, on the map with his ability to share it so eloquently. And whenever I have local meetings, I say about the Law of One. I say, how many of you have? How did you guys hear about the Law of One? How did you first hear about it? And overwhelmingly, it's David. Nobody else is even in a close second with that. He's caused a lot of people to be familiar with these books. Another thing that I feel like David put on the map was the Maharishi International University studies around the power of mass meditations, 7,000 people getting together, causing 70% reduction in crime. All these statistics were measured and published, and people just didn't know about it. And there's not really anything to be gained from people promoting this kind of thing. But David Wilcock didn't care about what people would think about all kinds of things he shared. And so it's unfortunate that people would accuse David of disinformation or misinformation because of how many things he was into. You can't expect everyone to get everything flawlessly in their citations, but he put out so much truth in his books around so many subjects that we wouldn't have heard about generally because they're just little tiny corners. Most corners of ufology and paranormal fields are ignored completely by the mainstream. And of course, Corey Goode is the shining example of this, that David helped bring Corey's testimony forward, and no one else was putting that much attention on him. So the raw material, what I'm talking about here is 106 channeling sessions they were conducted from 1981 to 1984. Carl Ruckert was the channel. Don Elkins was the person asking the questions, who was leading the effort. Jim McCarty joined in 1980 and was kind of the battery that helped them pull through raw. He was the final key in the puzzle of building enough protective heart energy, love in that group to make this channeling possible. They followed very strict protocols to ensure that there was no negative interference. Specific rituals that they were shared. Carla would always try to attune to the vibration of Jesus and have a challenge for whatever she was channeling, so that she could understand this was coming from the purest vibration. This is very comprehensive and coherent material. I've never seen anything quite like this. But you can find all the information on the organization at llresearch.org, and you can read the books online at lawofone.info. Is a great resource. And this is the crew. This was Don Elkins, the tall guy, Jim McCarty on the right, Carl Ruckert on the left. This is Carl Ruckert in a channeling session here right before she started. She's got 3 microphones up to her face because they knew the technical glitches are inevitable, as we've discovered today. And she was asked to put a Bible behind her head because of her vibrational resonance with that. She felt very open-hearted when she saw these comforting things behind her. Open to John chapter 1. And just as a quick disclaimer, these are just my perspectives. I highly encourage you to look these things up for yourself. You can learn more about the Law of One with more introductory material at ascensionworks.tv/Law of One for my other presentations where I've covered most of the basics. This is going to be a more harvest, ascension, and wanderer focused presentation. And I don't know if anything has changed that I could be out of date on. This material mostly came from 1981. And if anything contradicts what you believe, feel free to ignore my beliefs. I could be wrong. But I think it's very appropriate to point out that as soon as David Wilcock shot himself in the head when police were at his property, I realized that's exactly what happened to Don Elkins. But these are all the parallels I just noticed. Both David Wilcock and Don Elkins were the foremost promoters of the Law of One. Don Elkins died at age 54. David died at age 53. Both suffered a year of declining mental stability, psychological, emotional issues, depression. Both men had fear of being sent to a mental hospital. They didn't want to be locked up. This is something David said to me on the phone not too long ago. I was communicating with him on the phone. I helping him in many technical areas. So I've had a relationship with him since 2017. Both men shot themselves in the head in front of police at their home after being approached by police. Both men were losing a lot of weight steadily with increasing health issues. And the compounding effect of health issues can be one of the ways the Law of One books have referenced, one of the ways that people can be more easily attacked by psychic forces. When you're lower on energy, you're more susceptible to attacks, psychic attacks. Both men were actually trying to move out of their house unsuccessfully. This is another interesting factor that's talked about at the end of the Law of One books. Both were seemingly very aware of the presence of a very negative entity trying to take them out, and they didn't seem to see all the warning signs, or they couldn't work through it. It was too intense. This is my interpretation. But to cover some basics here, basically in the Law of One, they give a structure of our reality. They say that there are octaves, which are the fundamental unit of creation, which are like universes. Like our entire universe is called an octave, and that's because there's 7 densities, and the 8th density is the completion of this universe and the beginning of the next universe. And there are higher and lower planes in this universe, which we can call densities. Higher vibration of consciousness is more dense. Some people think of density as being like a more dense thing would be like a low vibration thing. But in the Law of One terminology, more density of light means higher vibration, because the more light you have in an area, the more awareness you have. And you can compare this to any electromagnetic system. The more dense it is, the more powerful it is. The 4D, 5D terminologies can be confused because they actually started out using the word dimension, 4th dimension, 5th dimension in the Law of One books, and they kind of switched to using the word density exclusively to explain what they're talking about. Most people think of dimensions as being like time and space, and you could think of these as the basic dimensions of physics, but there are obviously dimensions of consciousness, which we're going to call densities of consciousness. In addition to the dimensions and densities, there are inner and outer planes of existence. And this is easiest to understand by saying our physical reality is the outer planes, and our mind and our metaphysical reality is the inner planes. But there are many, many inner planes, and we don't even have an appreciation of just how deep the structure of reality is when we can't see all these planes of reality. But the more inner planes are those that are closer to the source of all thoughts, closer to the source of all mind, closer to the original thought. And that's they call that their one important statement, that there was one original thought that inspired all creation. And the densities of consciousness can be compared to music, whereby after 7 notes on your Western type of scale, if you will, the 8th notes begins a new octave. Within your great octave of existence, which we share with you, there are 7 densities within this octave. All begins in what you would call chaos, energy undirected and random in its infinity. Slowly, in your terms of understanding, there forms a focus of self-awareness. This begins with the first density of consciousness, which is the density of consciousness, the mineral and water life upon the planet, learning from fire and wind the awareness of being. This is the first density. So these are like raw elemental concepts in the first density: mineral and water learning from fire and wind the awareness of being. And then I'll talk about the other densities in a bit. But what's interesting to note is that the way densities work is discrete. Like when you're playing music on a scale, you could make a piano be out of tune, and you know it's out of tune. It doesn't sound right. You need to go a full 7th of the scale upwards to get to another note that has the proper vibration, that it sounds right. And it's the same thing with evolution across the densities. The nature of vibration is such that it may be seen as having mathematically straight or narrow steps These steps may be seen as having boundaries. Within each boundary, there are infinite gradations of vibration or color. You could think of seven colors in a rainbow too. However, as one approaches a boundary, an effort must be made to cross that boundary. The rainbow colors are a simplistic way of expressing the boundary divisions of your density. And we'll be moving into the fourth density with a push. It's not a very, very slow, gradual thing. It's a significant, discrete shift that's happening from one node up to the next node. And this shifting process began 45 years ago from 1981 considered. So this is like 1940, 1930s. The energy is vibrating more intensely through the 40-year period preceding the final movement of vibratory matter through the quantum leap, which I believe we're still in that period of the final movement through a quantum leap of energetic upgrades. The nature of quanta, the smallest particles of reality, is such that the movement over the boundary from third to fourth density is that of discrete placement of vibratory level. So, as I said, first density, water, fire, earth, air. Second density would be plants and animals, less often minerals and crystals. Third density is what we've been experiencing on Earth for 75,000 years at least, which would be called self-awareness, intelligent self-awareness, where we're here to make the choice to learn love, either for service to self or service to others. The fourth density is governed by the laws of love or understanding. We're trying to get there. Fifth density is governed by the laws of light or wisdom. To some degree, light and wisdom are seen as synonymous. The more light you have, the more consciousness you have, the more wisdom you have. All these concepts are connected. And then the sixth density is those beings vibrating at the level of the law of one, where they see all as one. Their consciousness is more increasingly unified with all of creation as they see all as one. And this is where our higher selves are at in our futures. Our higher selves are coming back to us from their sixth density of awareness. And the law of the seventh density would be where we have the law of foreverness being learned and appreciated. And that's when all of time becomes seen as one thing, before wrapping up and going to the eighth density. And they say that's like a spiritual mass that's accumulating as you approach the octave and become infinite as the infinite creator, becoming one with the infinite creator at that level. Some other points that are worth understanding is that they say we're basically in a 75,000-year cycle that's coming to a close. This is split up by three 25,000-year cycles, and it even seems that maybe these 25,000-year cycles are broken up by 12,000-year cycles, and that is related to the fall of Atlantis, possibly from 12,000 years ago, and the ice age that happened then. Many of us have been reincarnating repeatedly across the last 25,000-year cycle. Some of us have been here for a lot less time. And we're just in the beginning stages of this shifting into fourth density consciousness. They said it could be a 100 to 700 year transition period. Across the universe, there are approximately 10% of harvests of planet from third to fourth density are where everyone is negative. 60% of the harvests that are occurring, the graduations, are where everyone is positive on the planet, and approximately 30% of these occurrences of a planet ascending in this way, 30% are mixed across positive and negative, and we're in that category. In this condition, nearly all of the harvest is positive. In the event of mixed harvest, it is almost unknown for the majority of the harvest to be negative. When a planet moves strongly towards the negative, there's almost no opportunity for harvestable positive polarization. So this is a little bit of a clue that we're actually in a very positive direction right now, and we're heading toward a positive harvest, even though we have a lot of negativity on Earth that's the catalyst. In the event of mixed harvest, there is nearly always disharmony, and therefore added catalyst in the form of your so-called Earth changes. So there will be apparently continents shifting around, and this has maybe happened many times before. The fourth density is a vibrational spectrum. Your time-space continuum has spiraled. Your planetary sphere and our sun, our solar system, has gone into this vibration as like a region of the galaxy. This will cause the planetary sphere itself to electromagnetically realign its vibrational webs so that the Earth will be thus fourth density magnetized. There's a lot of references to magnetism in these books, and it seems like there's you could think of spiritual fields and auras as being like magnetic fields, I think. Those who finishing a cycle of experience demonstrate various grades of distortion of that understanding of thought and action are separated by their own free will choice into the vibratory distortion most comfortable. It's not like we're being judged by an external factor. We're getting what we are choosing, the vibration that's most comfortable to us in this process of upgrading our the whole planet's vibration. This process is watched over by nurturing beings who, being very close to the loved one in their distortions, nevertheless have the distortion toward active service. And it may be weird that they use the word distortions for so much, but they're basically using the word distortions to explain biases and preferences. And positive things are called distortions in the law of one because they're still broken away from the central appreciation of oneness and the perfection of oneness. And we'll also be seeing a 20-degree shift. And this was something that was in the Law of One books. I know Corey did not see this in the Law of One books, and I saw Corey describing seeing a 20-degree, and he said, looked like about 20 degrees, the vision he was shown. And this is also something you can experiment with if you have like a pyramid, or if you are doing spiritual work or meditation work. You can try aligning things. Not magnetic north is usually a great way to align to get strong vibrational energies. But if you align something you're working with, like a pyramid, 20 degrees east of north, you start picking up the fourth density vibrations, which are more subtle. But they said that this is what Carl Rucker needed the most. So when she was channeling, they had her oriented 20 degrees east of north. They were lining things up so that she would be receptive to that subtle vibration from that particular magnetic direction. So like I said, there'll be a transition period. 100 to 700 years is what they think. It's a huge, huge range. This cannot be accurate due to the volatility of your peoples in this space-time. So we have a lot of free will as a collective to shift the time scale of how fast we're upgrading. But the third density climate of planetary consciousness is retarding this process. And as this proceeds, the creation of the green ray density bodies will be gradual and will take place beginning with your third density type of physical vehicle, and through the means of bisexual reproduction become, by evolutionary processes, the fourth density body complexes can be born. So the children that are being born are increasingly in what they call the dual activated bodies. I think I have that slide for that here too. But this is fascinating to me that, it's not an instant upgrade, but the upgrade is so much faster than it had been for the past 25,000 years. What we're going to be seeing from children being born is going to amaze us as we continue to upgrade our bodies with new births. And also what we're trying to do is reduce the time it takes for everyone to get on the same page, basically. The reason that it takes 700 years, or could take 700 years, is because people have very different views about what they are seeking and what is of value. And some people are still valuing competition and service to self, and we have to agree to let go of the need to control and manipulate one another to get on the same page. And they call this, once we all get on the same page, they call it the social memory complex. And they also said the negative entities in this galaxy that want to hold us back, these Orion groups, which I'll talk about in a minute, these service to self entities, they move in their chariots, and chariots is a word that can mean ships. It's interesting, they said the ships actually can take on, some of them can take on any form that they seek to appear as. But they move in their chariots to conquer planetary mind, body, spirit social complexes before they reach the stage of achieving social memory. They're trying to disrupt our evolution so that we don't get on the same page. And Don asked, at what stage does the planet achieve social memory after that? And Ross said, a mind, body, spirit social complex, mind, body, spirit complex is an individual. A mind, body, spirit social complex is like a planet full of people. We become a social memory complex when the entire group of entities are of one orientation or seeking. The group memory that is now lost to individuals in the roots of the tree of mind then become known to the social complex, thus creating a social memory complex. The advantages of this complex, the social memory complex, are the relative lack of distortion in understanding the social beingness and the relative lack of distortion in pursuing the direction of seeking. For all understanding distortions are available to the entities of the society, which means basically telepathy. The way other people are thinking, the way other people are remembering things, that becomes accessible to what is now shielded from our conscious awareness because of what they would call the veil. We have no ability to tap in consciously into other people's memories. We can't see what's in other people's minds. It's very hard to do that in this environment. But as we're all on the same page, we all develop this ability like a public internet that's just psychic telepathic internet. And once we do that, that's why they say the Orion group tries to affect the social complexes before they reach the stage of achieving social memory, because once we're all working together on that level, we cannot be manipulated anymore. So the Orion group are said to be perhaps 1/10 of the size and numbers of the Confederation of Planets in the service of the Infinite Creator, which would be the positive groups that are helping us. Their power is the same as ours. The law of one blinks neither at the light or darkness. But the reason they're called the Orion group is because those of the Orion constellation have the upper hand and thus rule the other members of the Orion group. There are other star systems that are connected to the Orion group. Contact is made with those who call, positive or negative. Many people are reaching out in a negative way to understand how to manipulate and control others. Those upon a planetary sphere act much as you do to disseminate the attitudes and philosophy of their particular understanding of the law of one, which in this case, the negative path is service to self. They're teaching a philosophy of service to self. So these negative entities reach out to the elite. These become the elite. Through these, the attempt begins to create a condition whereby the remainder of the planetary entities are enslaved by their own free will. So this is the trick on Earth right now. We're getting tricked into being enslaved by our own free will through the negative elites that are tricked by these other entities. But I don't know if you even call it trick, because they just believe it's a true philosophy. It's just a distorted truth. At the present time, examples of well-meant and unintentional slavery are so numerous that it beggars our ability to enumerate them. So this would suggest that there's been some success on enslaving us by our own free will, because we're enslaving. They don't say we're enslaving animals. They don't clarify. They're just saying well-meant and unintentional slavery is so numerous on this planet. They didn't even begin to describe how vast that issue is on our planet. So try not to manipulate one another in your life. But the fifth density, the early fifth density negative entity, is kind of like the leader of a fourth density army. Every fifth density negative entity sees the creation as that which shall be put in order. And when they're dealing with a plane of reality such as Earth right now, the third density at this harvesting, this fifth density entity will see the mechanism of the calling, what we're seeking, what we're putting out more clearly, and have much less distortion towards plunder or manipulation by thoughts. But they send less wise entities, the fourth density entities, which they call the minions, to do this work, and any successes redound to the leaders. So the lower vibrational entities are interested in tempting us away from love, away from light. But the fifth density entity sees the difficulties and is able to see targets of opportunity, such as this one, meaning this particular channeling group, and say they're being constantly bombarded with whatever chinks in the armor were still open. They were being hit. Hence the death of Don Elkins. If the fourth density temptations towards distortion of ego, etc., are not successful, the fifth density entity then thinks in terms of the light, or in terms of removal of the light. This happened to David Wilcock and Don Elkins, I believe. They think in terms of ending the light instead of just deceiving it. And the thought forms of our people during this transition period are such that the mind-body-spirit complexes are scattered across the spectrum instead of becoming able to grasp the needle and point the compass in one direction. This is an interesting analogy that it's like we all have a kind of inner compass, and it's just not pointed in the same direction. We have all of our inner compasses are a little off. Thus, the entry into the vibration of love and understanding is not effective with the present societal complex. Thus, the harvest shall be such that many will repeat the third density cycle. The energies of your wanderers, your teachers, and your adepts at this time are all bent upon increasing the harvest. However, there are few to harvest, meaning a lot of people, according to this material, as of 1981, many people will be continuing their evolution on other planets where it's still a third density cycle that they're going to be experiencing. And they also said this is not something that's common, but in a different sort of discussion, they said that if an individual is able to penetrate into the intelligent infinity through all the chakras up into the crown, then that allows the mind body spirit complex to be harvested if it wishes at any time space during the cycle. So this is the idea of the spontaneous ascension that's still talked about, even though there's a gradual process for most people. It still says that there is an instantaneous process if a person reaches that level of consciousness and so chooses to upgrade their body. But they also say that most people don't want to give up their body, the body that they're using right away, because they can still use their body to share and serve and love in their current form. And why is it called the harvest? This is a challenging word for many people because it implies, like, some people think it implies something negative. But this was so often used in the Bible, and there was such an awareness by this particular group, like Carl Ruckert was very into Jesus in the Bible, and so it's fair to quote what Jesus said about the harvest. Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field, but while everybody was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, and then went away." And he answered, "An enemy has done this." The slave said to him, "Then do what you want to us, and do you want us to go gather up the wheat?" But he replied, "No. In gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both the weeds and the wheat, the positive and the negative, the mixed harvest, let both of them grow together until the harvest time. And at the harvest time, I will tell the reapers, collect the weeds first, bind them up in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn." And then he explained this parable. This is one of those cases in Scripture where Jesus had two teachings. He had the parable that's for anybody to just, the public could process that. And then he has the secret teaching that his disciples would get. And in the secret teaching, Jesus said, "The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels." And there's many other references to harvest in the Bible that, like Revelations 14, said there was an individual seated on a cloud in the sky, like a son of man, like Jesus, if Jesus is the Son of Man, with a golden crown on his head. He who sat on the cloud swung his sickle across the earth, and the earth was reaped. So this also seems like it's talking about angelic entities involved in the harvest. And more famous quotes, Jesus said, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few." This is a ripe ground for sharing truth right now. And we just have to get out there and make sure that we are the light for people. But as this transition continues, in order to inhabit this fourth density sphere, it will be necessary for all third density physical bodies to go through the process we refer to as death. And Ross said this is correct when Don Elkins asked that. Upon death, at the end of each planetary cycle, we have the anomaly of harvest. In harvest, the entity will transfer its indigo body after we die. Indigo body means the highest aspect of our non-material body goes into a violet ray manifestation, which is like the crown chakra level. And this is for the purpose of gauging the harvestability of the entity. So this is a thing that happens after we die that is very unusual. They call this an anomaly. And the first step of this process is to place the soul, the mind-body-spirit complex distortion, in the proper place of love light. This is a little bit hard to understand what they're describing here, but this is basically, this quote from session 10, question 9, is the clearest picture they gave of exactly what this is, this upgrade process. This is placing us in a place of love and light that is done to ensure proper healing of the complex and eventual attunement with the totality slash beingness complex, meaning the totality of what we are across all of space and time is a kind of complex in itself that we're trying to become back in attunement with. This takes a very variable length of your time space. After this is accomplished, the experience of the cycle is dissolved. All of our experiences are dissolved and filtered until only the distillation of distortions in its purest form remains. All the experiences we've had are dissolved down into what is the pure wisdom and love and light to be gained from this experience on Earth. At this time, the harvested beingness evaluates the density needs of its beingness. Where do we need to go next? And chooses the more appropriate and new environment for either a repetition of the cycle or moving forward into the next cycle. This is the manner of the harvesting, guarded and watched over by many. So who are these many who are guarding and watching over this process? They said in session 51, there are 3 levels of beings watching over the harvest to ensure a proper harvesting so that each entity may have the fullest opportunity to express its highest violet ray selfhood. And the violet ray basically represents a summation of all of our other energy centers, our aura, you could say, all of our energy combined, it can be seen in the violet ray. The first level of the harvesters is planetary, and that which may be called angelic, or the higher self of an entity, and those interplane entities which have been attracted to this entity through its inner seeking. So the non-incarnated beings who are helping here on Earth are the angelic beings that are helping us, and our higher self they also put in this first level because it's related to processing just within the Earth sphere. The second class of those who ward this process are those of the Confederation, positive groups, standing in the small places at the edge of the steps of light love. And I don't know if they're being intentionally obscure in this when they say small places at the edge of the steps, but they're standing at the edges so that those being harvested will not, no matter how confused or unable to make contact with their higher self, stumble and fall away for any reason other than the strength of the light. These Confederation entities catch those who stumble and set them aright so that they may continue into the light. I don't know what this means. I don't know if this is 100% talking about after we die and when we're not in the body, or if there's something else that should be even seen as perhaps wanderers on Earth, starseeds on Earth are helping others not stumble and fall away from their path of growth. I can only speculate on some of that. But I'll talk about all these categories in a bit here. The third group watching over this process is the group that you call the guardians. And this group is from the octave above our own, which seems to imply they're from the next universe, beyond time and space, and serves in this manner as light bringers. These guardians provide the precise emissions of light love and exquisitely fastidious disseminations of discrimination so that the precise light love vibration of each entity may be ascertained. So it seems that this need for fastidious disseminations of discrimination is something that maybe the Confederation entities are calling upon, or the angelic entities are calling upon, but they're offering discrimination. And these helpers are around to ensure a proper harvesting so that each entity may have the fullest opportunity to express its violet ray selfhood. But I'll talk about guardians now, what this word means. Interestingly, this is a word that Corey was using at some point, and he talked about beings coming in that were sphere beings that were from beyond the 8th density. And when Ra was asked about, how come you don't know about these other octaves? And Ra said, let us compare octaves to islands. It may be that the inhabitants of an island are not alone upon a planetary sphere, but if an ocean-going vehicle in which one may survive has not been invented, true knowledge of other islands is possible only if an entity comes from among the islanders and says, I'm from elsewhere. This is a rough analogy. However, we have evidence of this sort, both of previous creation and creation to be, the next octave, as we in the stream of space-time and time-space view these apparently non-simultaneous events. Meaning they don't understand it, how there are these other entities coming from these other creations. But in session 7, they talked about a body called the Council of Saturn, and that there are 24 guardian entities that are assisting the council in offering aid to those who are unsure how to aid social memory complexes requesting aid, such as humans on Earth, in a way that is consonant with both the call, the law, and the number of those calling. That is to say, sometimes the resistance of the call. So because they're trying, like the entire universe is built around preservation of free will, because they're trying to honor the free will of everyone on Earth, it's extremely difficult to have that discernment, discrimination as to how can an entity actually interact and provide assistance to humanity that is in accordance with the amount of calling happening, the number of people calling, and the actual law of free will, the law of one expressed through things like the law of free will. So this extremely difficult judgment process is why we apparently need light from the next creation. And possibly this means that there's a convergence happening across universes that's just beyond our comprehension. But going back to something more local, they said that there is a confederation of planets in service of the infinite creator that Ra is a part of. There's approximately 53 civilizations in this confederation, but there are many confederations. This particular confederation works with the planetary spheres of 7 of your star systems and is responsible for the callings of the densities of these star systems. So this is a relatively tiny, tiny, tiny corner of the galaxy that our particular confederation is working with. The confederation is composed of many of those and other densities in your own density, entities within your planetary sphere, meaning underground, it would seem, like what Corey might describe as the Anshar, and within the inner or angelic realms. Each of these groups developing a social memory complex and then dedicating social memory complex to the singular service to the one infinite creator may join the confederation. So it's just a matter of, are you in the same vibration? Are you dedicated to service? Then the confederation is open to allowing humanity to join them when we get to that point. But they also call themselves not just the confederation, but they call themselves the brothers and sisters of sorrow. And when Don Elkins asked, who are wanderers? Where do they come from? Ross said, imagine, if you will, the sands of your shores. As countless as the grains of sand are, as countless as the grains of sand are the sources of intelligent infinity. When a social memory complex has achieved its complete understanding of its desire, it may conclude that its desire is service to others, with the distortion towards reaching their hand figuratively to any entities who call for aid. These entities, who you may call the brothers and sisters of sorrow, move towards this calling of sorrow. These entities are from all reaches of the infinite creation and are bound together by the desire to serve in this distortion. It's because of the intense sorrow that they're moving towards the sorrow to be of service. The general cause of service, such as the Confederation offers, is that of the primal distortion of the law of one, which is service. The one being of the creation is like unto a body, if you will accept this third density analogy. Would we ignore a pain in the leg, a bruise upon the skin, a cut which is festering? No, there is no ignoring a call. We, the entities of sorrow, choose as our service the attempt to heal the sorrow, which we are calling analogous to the pains of a physical body complex distortion. And talking about wanderers, David Wilcock brought this up. I thought I would share this. This helped me. He referenced being aided by Scott Mandelker's survey. Scott Mandelker was another great teacher of the law of one. You can find his website, scottmandelker.com. And he's got an ET quiz on there that you can try out and see if you're an ET soul. You could take a picture of that URL if you wanted, but I'll have this on the internet. And in Scott Mandelker's survey that he created, he asked questions like, do you often think about daydream or fantasize about ETs, UFOs, and other worlds? Did you feel like ordinary things when you were a child? Did you feel like ordinary things around you were somehow strange, like the human body, the color of the sky, trees and nature, human architecture, and adults? Did you ever feel as if your parents were not your real parents, that you had a missing brother or sister, or a home someplace far away? Are you kind, gentle, peaceful, and non-aggressive, not just sometimes, but always? Have you had dreams, visions, or sightings of UFOs that inspired real spiritual growth? Many of us that have many of those things, and it's not as common as you might think, some of those things. But the number of wanderers, they said in 1981, the number of wanderers on Earth was approximately 65 million in 1981. And this was increasing heavily due to an intensive need to lighten the planetary vibration. The challenge and danger of a wanderer is that it will forget its mission, become karmically involved, and thus be swept into the maelstrom, which it had incarnated to help avoid this destruction. The wanderer has the potential of greatly accelerating the density which it came from as it progresses in evolution in a lower density human body at this time. This is due to the intensive life experiences and opportunities of the third density. This is much more intense here on third density than it is in the higher densities. Thusly, the positively oriented wanderer chooses to hazard the danger of forgetting in order to be of service to others by radiating love of others. If the forgetting is penetrated, if we can remember our mission, remember why we're here, remember what we're doing, such as through people like David Wilcock helping shake us awake a little bit. If the forgetting is penetrated, the amount of catalyst in third density will polarize the wanderer with much greater efficiency than shall be expected in the higher and more harmonious densities. Similarly, the negatively oriented wanderer dares to hazard the forgetting in order that it might accelerate its progress in evolution in its own density by serving itself in the third density by offering to other selves the opportunity to hear the information having to do with negative polarization. But they have also said many times that the negative wanderers are far less likely to want to take this danger. They don't want to risk opening their hearts. It's a strange thing that they are afraid of incarnating in human bodies. There was a question: do any of these wanderers have physical ailments in this Earth situation? And Ross said, due to the extreme variance between the vibratory distortions of third density and those of the more dense densities, if you will, wanderers have as a general rule, wanderers have some form of handicap, difficulty, or feeling of alienation which is severe. The most common of these difficulties are alienation, the reaction against the planetary vibration by personality disorders. Personality disorders are common, and body complex ailments, indicating difficulty in adjusting to the planetary vibrations, which comes in the form of something like allergies, as you would call them. I certainly had tons of allergies as a kid. The wanderers are coming to this planet right now are subject to Orion thoughts. This is a question that was asked. Wanderers become completely the creature of third density and mind-body complex. There is just as much chance of such influence from Orion, negative psychic attacks, such influence to a wanderer entity as to any other mind-body spirit complex of this planetary sphere. The only difference occurs in the spirit complex. The spirit, if it wishes, the spirit has an armor of light, if you will, which enables it to recognize more clearly that which is not as it would be appropriately be desired by the mind body spirit complex. We can get a sense of things with our spiritual biases. They said this is not more than a bias and cannot be called an understanding. And this is a very important point to avoid the trap of perceiving specialness or somehow being different from others. We have preferences. Earth is full of people with preferences, and a bias towards having an armor of light as a preference. We have a preference that we will not be manipulated along a negative path. Furthermore, the wanderer is, in its own mind-body-spirit complex, less distorted towards the deviousness of third density positive-negative confusions. Thus, it often does not recognize as easily as a more negative individual the negative nature of thoughts or beings. So it's actually harder for wanderers often to understand the negativity on this planet, and there is ability to be more easily deceived at times. And Carl Rucker, the channel for the loved one, taught about this in her channeling handbook, that to some degree it's helpful to be gullible. If you want to channel an entity, not putting up a bunch of barriers to receiving information is actually kind of a requirement. But you have to be very careful. And this is, interesting, like it's comparable to Ephesians chapter 6 in the Bible, which is about the armor of God. And nestled in this discussion about the armor, the Apostle Paul says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God." That's a good one. That's kind of if I should, I'm running low on time now. Otherwise, I'll go into more things. Um, but as I said, this is it's more appropriate to think of this armor as a bias. But every entity has its own unique abilities, biases, and specialties, so that from each portion of each density represented among the wanderers comes an array of pre-incarnative talents, which may then be expressed upon this plane which you now experience, so that each wanderer, in offering itself before incarnation, has some special service to offer in addition to the doubling effect of planetary love and light and the basic function of serving as a beacon or shepherd. So this what they're saying is the basic function of wanderer is increasing, doubling the effect of planetary love and light. We're just here as sources of love and light, but there is additional talents that we may bring in that are uh, part of our soul. Thus, there are those of fifth density whose abilities to express wisdom are great. There are fourth and sixth density wanderers whose ability to serve as, shall we say, passive radiators or broadcasters of love and light are immense. There are many others whose talents brought into this density are quite varied. Musicians comes to mind, artists come to mind. Um, but again, I'll say that there's identity. It's more people noticing that there's a lot of cultures, subcultures creating specialness feelings, ego, building up egos around identity as a starseed. And this is where we become manipulated. And the normal gambit of fourth density minions, as I was saying earlier, the fourth density attack is that of tempting of an entity or group of entities, individuals on Earth, away from total polarization towards service to others, away from love, and towards the aggrandizement of self or of social organizations with which the self identifies. We're tempted to identify as being special ourselves or seeing groups or organizations as special and needing to be set apart in some way, as opposed to being seen as just another corner of the creator. Nearly all positive channels and groups, they said, positive channels, nearly all positive channels and groups may be lessened in their positivity or rendered quite useless by what we may call the temptations offered by fourth density negative thought forms. They may suggest many distortions towards specific information. We can be caught up on specific things all the time, towards the aggrandizement of the self, towards the flowering of the organization in some political, social, or fiscal way. These distortions remove the focus from the one infinite source of love and light, of which we are all messengers, humble and knowing that we of ourselves are but the tiniest portion of the Creator, a small part of a magnificent entirety of infinite intelligence. But there are the two sides to this, always affecting us, positive and negative polarity. The purpose of polarity, the intensity between this positive and negative vibration, the purpose of polarity is to develop the potential to do work. This is the great characteristic of those experiments which have evolved since the concept of the choice, which happened in the earlier stages of our galaxy's evolution, when entities were given more and more ability to be veiled from the deeper aspects of our mind, and then we have to actually choose love. We can't just see that as the obvious choice. We have to reach out and choose it. Work is done far more efficiently and with greater purity, intensity, and variety by the voluntary searching of mind body spirit complexes for the lessons of third and fourth densities. Each entity is the creator. The entity, as it becomes more and more conscious of itself, gradually comes to a turning point at which it will determine to seek either in service to others or in service to self, as a choice, a fundamental choice for our personality. The seeker becomes the adept when it has balanced with minimal adequacy the energy centers red, orange, yellow, and blue. I'll talk about these later. With the addition of green for the positive. This is the difference between positive and negative entities in terms of the energy field, is that the heart center, the green center, is skipped over by negative entities. And once we do access the higher chakras, the adept begins to do less and less of the preliminary or outer work having to do with function and begins to affect the inner work, which has to do with being. As the adept becomes a more and more consciously crystallized entity, it gradually manifests more and more of that which it has always been since before time, that is the one infinite creator. We become the creator as we transform our beingness instead of just transforming our function or our outer aspect. but we are always free to choose a path. Some love the light, some love the darkness. It is a matter of the unique and infinitely various creator choosing and playing amongst its experiences as a child on a picnic. Some enjoy the picnic and find the sun beautiful, the food delicious, the games refreshing, and glow with the joy of creation. Some find the night delicious, their picnic being pain, difficulty, sufferings of others, and the examination of the perversities of nature. These enjoy a different picnic. All these experiences are available. It is the free will of each entity which chooses the form of play, the form of pleasure. Um, but there are a lot of reasons that we're being contacted. Um, they said there have been as many as 15 of the Confederation groups, entities, different, you could say, races from the Confederation in our skies at any one time. The others are available to us through thought. As many as 15 have appeared in physical form. At present, there are 7 races operating with craft in your density of the positive group. Their purposes are very simple: to allow those entities of your planet to become aware of infinity, which is often best expressed to the uninformed as the mysterious or unknown. So the reason why people cannot get a handle on the UFO phenomenon is because they're intending to express the nature of infinity through awareness of that which is mysterious or unknown. And they said this started more when your first nuclear device was developed and used. Permission was granted by the Council of Saturn for Confederation members to minister unto your peoples in such a way as to cause mystery to occur. The mystery and unknown quality of the occurrences we are allowed to offer have the hoped for intention of making your peoples aware of infinite possibility. When your peoples grasp infinity, then and only then can the gateway be opened to the law of one. And this is a mysterious concept. You know, we're dealing with finity, with finite forms, finite concepts, but there is deep within us an ability to begin to appreciate an infinite mystery. And this sort of happened to the Atlanteans. They said about the same time as we first appeared in the skies over Egypt 13,000 years ago, and continuing thereafter, other entities of the Confederation appeared to the Atlanteans who had reached a level of philosophical understanding which was consonant with communication to encourage and inspire studies in the mystery of unity. There was enough of a calling, enough of a reaching out to understand that they then were able to reach out to, like the Egyptians, the Atlanteans, to inspire studies in the mystery of unity. And so their goal is this infinite possibility, awareness of this infinite possibility. And wanderers are more easily contacted by the Confederation entities. The most efficient mode of Confederation contact, though, is that which you experience this space-time, meaning the group that was channeling. So the most efficient mode of contact is channeling, they said. The infringement upon free will is greatly undesired. Channeling is the way of communicating that preserves our free will most clearly. Therefore, those entities which are wanderers upon your plane of illusion are the only subjects for the thought projections, the manifestations, which make up the so-called close encounters and meetings between positively oriented social memory complexes and wanderers. Social memory complexes meaning the Confederation races which are coming to us. The meetings that occur are happening with wanderers who are already ET souls who are ready for this. And if you are being contacted, channeling or otherwise, Ross says, if there is fear and doom, the contact was quite likely of a negative nature. If the result of this contact is hope, friendly feelings, and the awakening of a positive feeling of purposeful service to others, the marks of Confederation contact are evident. And I've had discussions with Corey about the the way you can't really know if an entity is trying to flood you with love. But I really like this phrase, a positive feeling of purposeful service to others. Because if you are set on a mission to help people because of your contact experiences, it does not make sense to me how that was a negative contact. Um, so they asked about, could you give me an example of one of these meetings between a wanderer and a social memory complex, what the wanderer would experience when these kinds of contact events occur? Ross said, one such example, of which you are familiar, because Don Elkins was studying this stuff heavily, and he had a book written about it called Secrets of the UFO, which you can find for free on the llresearch.org website. One example, which you're familiar, is the one known as Morris. In this case, the previous contact, which other entities in this entity's circle of friends had experienced, was a negatively oriented contact. Now, the negative entities are able to contact non-wanderers, I think, and there's more of an opportunity for the negative when there's an invitation. Then the negative entities are more likely to be able to affect others in directions of fear. But Ross said, you will recall that the entity Morris was impervious to this contact and could not see with the physical optical apparatus. They could have just said the eyes. They could not see this contact. However, the inner voice alerted the one known as Morris to go by itself to another place, and there an entity with a thought form, shape, and appearance. And it's interesting that they say physical manifestations can be called thought forms because thoughts can create manifested forms when you're dealing with that much conscious density, I guess. There's an entity with the thought form, shape, and appearance of the other contact, another contact, which appeared and gazed at this person, Morris, thus awakening in it the desire to seek the truth of this occurrence and of the experiences of its incarnation in general. Thus, the feeling of being awakened or activated is the goal of this type of contact. The duration and imagery used varies depending upon the subconscious expectations of the wanderer, which is experiencing this opportunity for activation. And this is consistent with so many testimonies I've heard. Basically, what's in a person's subconscious mind is analyzed and being worked upon so that the contact will have this desired effect of allowing us to become feeling like we have been activated or awakened. And then we are more useful in service to others when we are awakened and activated. But going back to the discussion of what's happening with the time of harvest and ascension, they said what would happen soon after 1981, you will find a sharp increase in the number of people whose vibrational potentials include the potential for fourth density distortions. Thus, there will seem to be, shall we say, a new breed. These are those incarnating for fourth density work. There will also be a sharp increase in the short run of negatively oriented or polarized people in social complexes, both people and social complexes that are negatively oriented, due to the polarizing conditions of the sharp delineation between fourth density characteristics and third density self-service orientation. Those who remain in fourth density upon this plane will be at the so-called positive orientation after this transition period, I assume is what they're saying. Many will come from elsewhere, where it would appear that with all the best efforts of the Confederation, which includes those from your people's inner planes, inner civilizations, and those from other dimensions, the harvest will still be much less than that which this planetary sphere is capable of comfortably supporting in service. Another way they described the ascension process, they said the necessity for graduation to fourth density is an ability to use, welcome, and enjoy a certain intensity of the white light of the one infinite creator. The measurement would be that of an entity walking up a set of stairs, each of which was imbued with a certain quality of light. The stair upon which an entity stopped would be either third density light or fourth density light. Between the two stairs lies the threshold. To cross that threshold is difficult. And one of the ways that we have to, there are several things that they've said. This is kind of funny how it's like in the Bible, Jesus talks about salvation in so many different ways. He tells the rich person, it's harder for camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven. But there are many other discussions that Jesus said about salvation that made people think this is, it's not about accumulating wealth. It's about many things going on in the heart. To attain 51% dedication to the welfare of other selves is as difficult as attaining a grade of 5% dedication to other selves. The sinkhole of indifference is between these two. So they're saying that in order to become harvestable in a positive direction, you have to be at least half willing to keep your heart open half of the time. And if you want to go in the negative direction and be part of that negative hierarchy on some other star system, then you have to be willing to be helpful to people less than 5% of the time. And I could speculate that that's because there's 7 levels of the lower chakras, and if you break it down by math, you'd have to have all 7 levels of all your lower chakras be oriented toward the negative to have less than 5% dedication to other selves. But they also said the faculty of faith or will needs to be understood, nourished, and developed in order to have an entity which seeks past the boundary of third density. This is another requirement for being ready, is developing faith and will. And faith and will are terms that they use in the context of spiritual evolution throughout the material. Those are the two principles that kind of represent what our spirit is orienting towards, our faith and our will. Those entities which are unbalanced, especially as to the primary rays, meaning the red, the yellow, and the blue chakras, those are more important, they're saying, for maintaining balance. Those that are unbalanced will be incapable of sustaining the impact of the love and light of intelligent infinity to the extent necessary for harvest. They also said regarding balance, balance is not indifference, but rather the observer not blinded by any feelings of separation, but rather fully imbued with love. I mentioned briefly earlier that there's some children being born with transitional bodies. And they described this in session 63, saying many incarnating have what you may call a double body in activation. I don't necessarily understand this. The entities birthing these fourth density entities experience a great feeling of the connection and the use of spiritual energies during pregnancy. This is due to the necessity for manifesting the double body. This transitional body is able to appreciate the fourth density vibratory complexes as the in-streaming increases without the accompanying disruption of the third density body. So there's a value in assimilating these higher energies more for these newer souls. These souls now incarnating who are consciously aware of these fourth density understandings, which the third density is unable to remember due to the forgetting, these entities have an added attraction to an entity oriented toward service to others of dwelling in a troubled third density environment and offering its love and compassion. So this is seen as an added attraction that there's so much struggles on earth and we get to be of service, those beings in this category. See it as a great opportunity to be incarnating at this time. And they talked a little bit about earth changes. They basically said it's trivial to consider these things, but there is added catalyst in the form of so-called earth changes. The more important thing is the core of your heart. But they referenced that Lemuria is an example of a continent that went through earth changes. This was a helpful and harmless place which was washed beneath the ocean during a readjustment of your sphere's tectonic plates through no action of their own. It wasn't because they had some warfare or something that was causing their continent to go down. It was just a natural occurrence because there is a confluence emerging, a confluence of energies at the ending of a major cycle. This encouraged what was an already inevitable adjustment in the movement of the surfaces of your planetary sphere. And I mentioned earlier that they said there's every indication that there'll be a 20-degree realignment of the Earth axes. And when Corey talked about this, he said it was because of the sun. The sun hit the Earth with energy, and it knocked it out of its normal alignment. And in fourth density, thoughts increasingly become things. When Don Elkins asked, has the vibration of the photon, the basic unit of our particles of our reality, increased in frequency already? And Ross said, this is correct. It is this influence of the increasing vibration of even light itself, the photons. It is this influence which has begun to cause thoughts to become things. As an example, you may observe the thoughts of anger becoming those cells of the physical body complex going out of control to become what you call cancer. That's an example of negative thoughts becoming a thing. And regarding the nature of fourth density, they said we can only explain what it is not and approximate what it is because we don't have shared experience with a fourth density being to understand fully what this is. They can only approximate it with words. They said that which fourth density is not, it is not of words unless chosen. We don't have to communicate with words. It is not of heavy chemical vehicles for body complex activities. It is not of disharmony within self. It is not of disharmony within peoples. It is not within limits of possibility to cause disharmony in any way. It is a plane where one is aware of the thoughts of other selves. It is a plane where one is aware of the vibrations of other selves. It is a plane of compassion and understanding of the sorrows of third density. It is a plane striving towards wisdom or light. It is a plane wherein individual differences are pronounced, although automatically harmonized by group consensus. We're still individuals. We just understand each other a lot better. The use of physical pain is minimal in the fourth density. You would call this variety of pain weariness. At the end of an incarnation, they still have it's longer lifetimes, but they still have a need for weariness at the end of a lifetime to take a hint to move on. One quote that's been helpful to me recently, thinking about the way our planet is healing and the way we are healing, they said one of the primal distortions of the law of one is that of healing. Healing occurs when a mind-body-spirit complex, or an individual, realizes deep within itself the law of one, that is, that there is no disharmony, no imperfection, that all is complete and whole and perfect. What does it take to see everything as complete and whole and perfect? This is a part of our healing. Thus, the intelligent infinity within this mind-body-spirit complex reforms the illusion of body, mind, or spirit to a form more congruent with the law of one. So this is the healing. We're realigning, we're reforming the illusion because we're beginning to see with a higher perspective that all is whole and perfect and complete already. And this is apparent as we are seeking to fully activate our energy centers. They said this: the seeker seeks the one. That one is to be sought, as we have said, by the balanced and self-accepting self, aware both of its apparent distortions and its total perfection. Resting in this balanced awareness of both our distortions and our perfection, the entity then opens the self to the universe which it is. This is like activating the crown chakra, or the pineal gland that can see through into the crown. The light energy of all things may then be attracted by this intense seeking, and wherever the inner seeking meets the attracted cosmic prana, the life energy, realization of the one takes place. And this is what they call the Kundalini activation, which I'll try to describe here as a quick summary of the chakra system. They said, we are attempting as entities in any true color of this octave to move the meeting place of our inner and outer natures further and further along or upward along the energy centers, which is basically, it's like saying these chakras are each like portals between the inner dimensions and the external dimensions. That's why there's like organs that are linked to different kinds of metaphysical, emotional vibrations. It's because these chakras are literally the points in our being, inner plane and outer external plane, that are connecting our being across the inner and outer natures. Our mind and our body are connected through these, or our spirit and our mind and body are connected all. And referencing what these chakras represent, they said each experience will be sequentially understood by the growing and seeking mind-body-spirit complex, first in terms of survival, which is red, the red chakra, the root chakra, seeing in terms of survival, then understanding experiences in terms of personal identity, the orange, then seeing in terms of social relations, the yellow, then seeing in terms of universal love, the green, then seeing in terms of how the experience may beget free communication, openness and honesty are key in the Blu-ray activation. Then, in terms of how the experience may be linked to universal energies, that's the indigo, the pineal. And finally, in terms of the sacramental nature of each experience. Meanwhile, the Creator lies within. In the North Pole, the crown is already upon the head. We already have the crown chakra. And the entity is potentially a God because we have access to the infinite nature of our being through letting go of our separated identities and tuning into this highest energy that can come in through us. The adept is one who begins to do less and less of the preliminary or outer work having to do with function, I said this earlier, and begins to affect the inner work having to do with being. The entity who penetrates intelligent infinity is basically capable of walking the universe with unfettered tread. There have been many examples of gurus across time that have reached this level and try to teach about it. But this has a lot to do with our discipline and practice that we're doing to clear our chakras and stay focused on purified light. And they said once the green ray has been achieved, the heart has been opened, the ability of the entity to enter blue ray is immediate and is only awaiting the efforts of the individual. The indigo ray, though, the pineal, is opened only through considerable discipline and practice, largely having to do with acceptance of self. Not only acceptance of self as the polarized and balanced self, but as the creator, as an entity of infinite worth. This will begin to activate the indigo ray. And they said specifically about Carl Rucker that she had unworthiness distortions. The unworthiness feelings she had were why she had trouble opening up to the healing that she needed. But acceptance of self, forgiveness of self, and the direction of the will, this is the path towards the disciplined personality. Your faculty of will is that which is powerful within you as co-creator. You cannot ascribe to this faculty too much importance. The faculty of will. Thus, it must be carefully used and directed in service to others for those upon the positively oriented path. We get stuck until we forgive, and they said this is like karma. Karma is that which may be called inertia. Those actions which are put into motion will continue using the ways of balancing until such time as the controlling or higher principle which you may liken unto your braking or stopping is invoked. It's like the car is rolling, you got to hit on the brakes to stop the car from rolling in that direction. That's what forgiveness is. That's how we stop karma. The stoppage of the inertia of action may be called forgiveness. These two concepts are inseparable. In forgiveness lies the stoppage of the wheel of action, or what you call karma. Forgiveness of other self is forgiveness of self. An understanding of this insists upon full forgiveness upon the conscious level of self and other self, for they are one. A full forgiveness is thus impossible without inclusion of the self. But the root cause of blockage is the lack of the ability to see the other self as the creator, or to phrase this differently, the lack of love. They also said that where we're at right now on Earth, compared to fourth density, we have 100 times as intensive a program of catalytic action from which to distill distortions and learn teachings than any other of the densities. It's 100 times more intense here on third density. Thus, the learned teachings are most confusing to the mind-body-spirit complex, which is inundated by the ocean of experience. That's where we're at, is we're being inundated by an ocean of experience, and we have a much more difficult time finding our lessons. But they're thrown in our face again and again. Consider, if you will, the path life experience complex has taken. Consider the coincidences and odd circumstances by which one thing has flowed to the next. Consider this well. Each entity will receive the opportunity that each needs. Another great quote I love, they say the proper role of the entity in this density is to experience all things desired, to then analyze, understand, and accept these experiences, distilling from them the love light within them. Nothing shall be overcome. That which is not needed falls away. So the perfection can be seen in this principle. And also, as we reach fourth density, the frontal lobes of the brain start to wake up. They have much more use in fourth density. The primary mental emotive condition of this large area of the so-called brain is joy or love in its creative sense. Thus, the energies of healing, learning, I don't know why it's jumping, the building and energizing are to be found in this area. During the fourth density experience, the third density planetary sphere is not useful. Oh, no, what happened? Let's move on. But joy or love in its creative sense is what you get from the frontal lobes of the brain. And that's how we do the paranormal activations. And this is also connected to what they call intelligent infinity. The paranormal healing ability, or like other paranormal abilities, is affected by the opening of a pathway or shuttle into intelligent infinity. The spirit also, they said, is like a shuttle. It is the right or privilege or duty of these opening consciously this gate to intelligent infinity in the crown chakra to choose the manner of their leaving of the density, if we choose. Perceptions of intelligent infinity range from a limitless joy. Limitless joy is one experience people have when they get to this state, to a strong dedication to service to others while in the incarnated state. Most often, this will be perceived as one of unspeakable profundity. However, it is not useful for the entity to immediately desire the sensation of the incarnation, as I said before. Rather, the desire to communicate or use this experience to aid others is extremely strong. And as I'm getting close to the end here, I thought I should throw in what they said is the most nearly centered and usable exercise within our illusion complex. And to use these exercises that they gave in session 10, they said the foundation or prerequisite is a predilection towards what may be called meditation, contemplation, or prayer. With an attitude where you're preferring meditation, contemplation, or prayer, these exercises can be processed. Without it, the deity will not sink down into the roots of the tree of mind, thus enabling and ennobling the body and touching the spirit. So you got to spend time in meditation. The exercise that they gave is the most useful, most usable, and centered. Center is an interesting word that they're saying this is, of all the other lessons we're learning, this one is at the center of all of them. The moment contains love. That is the lesson goal of this illusion or density. The exercise is to consciously seek that love in awareness and understanding distortions. The first attempt to seek love is the cornerstone. Upon this choosing rests the remainder of the life experience of an entity. The second seeking of love rests within the moment, begins the addition, and they said there's like an exponential effect. The third seeking powers the second, the fourth powering and doubling the third. And they referred to this also with calling, when more people are getting together and putting out a call for assistance from angelic or extraterrestrial entities, that there's an exponential effect as more people are added into this equation. And this is the same thing as more love is being sought. There's an exponential building of this empowerment. As with the previous type of empowerment, there will be some loss of power due to the flaws within the seeking and the distortion of insincerity. Insincerity holds us back a little bit when we're seeking love. However, the conscious statement of self to self, of the desire to seek love, is so central an act of will that, as before, the loss of power due to this friction of insincerity is inconsequential. So even if you're half-assing it and just seeking love every day, seeking more and more love and light in your life, that's the way. So one thing they said when they were asked, is it possible to help an entity reach fourth density in these last days? They said it is impossible to help a being directly. It is only possible to make catalyst available in whatever form, the most important being the radiation of realization of oneness with the Creator from the self, less important being information such as we share with you. Most important, radiation of realization of oneness with the Creator. We ourselves do not feel an urgency for this information to be widely disseminated. They do not feel any urgency. We encourage a dispassionate attempt to share information without concern for numbers or quick growth among others. That you attempt to make this information available is, in your terms, your service. The attempt, if it reaches one, reaches all. We cannot offer shortcuts to enlightenment. Enlightenment is of the moment, an opening to intelligent infinity. It can only be accomplished by the self for the self. Another self cannot learn enlightenment, but only learn information, inspiration, or a sharing of love, of mystery, of the unknown, that makes the other self reach out and begin the seeking process that ends in a moment. But who can know when an entity will open the gate to the present? And that was another description of intelligent infinity access, is opening the gate to the present. It's very powerful to stay present in the present moment, because that's where perfection is. There's no perfection in the past. There's no perfection in wondering about the future. There's always perfection in the present. And so I've been doing a podcast on the Law of One. If you want to learn more, ascensionworks.tv/law of one. Nick here, Nick in the back, helping me with these. And if you want to start a podcast of your own on AscensionWorks TV, which is a platform I created with Corey Good, I can help you do that. AscensionWorks.tv. You can get in contact with me and do a podcast on there. I'm a programmer by trade. I can make a website, especially with AI. It's super easy to add podcasting features on there. So I have podcasting features on our website. I appreciate you guys. That was all I wanted to share.